Presenting the Kemençe of the Black Sea, a sample library of a bowstring instrument which originated on the southern shore of the Black Sea. This is not the pear-shaped classical Kemençe, but the long box-shaped folk version. The instrument was sampled and programmed by someone who doesn't really play it in traditional style and really bought it years ago because violins get really expensive and Kemençe isn't nearly as common. So it can be used for traditional music, but the way it's played also fits in with the past few years' Nordic trend of quietly played, intimately recorded strings with human imperfections. So from the Black Sea to the Arctic Ocean, because why not? The library contains 10 different articulations. Most of these are common or core techniques in Western music, and there's some out there stuff as well. I didn't really do much work on this one personally, so it's a little different than the typical Karoryfer release, but it does have the weird techniques. The lowest string is tuned to C and the other two to G, both a fifth above the C. Since the two G strings are tuned the same, the outer one is sampled. The instrument was recorded in two different ways: a close-mic'd stereo XY microphone paired directly in front, and a single piezo or contact microphone taped to the back of the instrument's body. This walkthrough uses no effects except for Sforzando's built-in reverb. Without reverb, the samples are very dry. At the top of the interface, the volume and pan of each set of recordings can be controlled, as well as the overall dynamics of the instrument. Only one dynamic layer was recorded for the long articulations, and the dynamics control uses a response curve which decreases the volume of the stereo mic samples to a greater degree than the piezo samples. The dynamics control affects the long bowed articulations and has no effect on the short articulations, which are dynamic controlled by note velocity. There are no true legato samples here. With the polyphonic switch off, the instrument will play in simulated legato mode, and with the polyphonic switch on, multiple notes can be played at once and no simulated legato is applied. Unlike most Karoryfer releases, this instrument includes release tail samples for all the long articulations for more realistic note endings, and the volume of those tails is controlled with the tail volume knob. With the tails only switch on, the release samples can be played by themselves, with dynamics controlled by the velocity and the tail volume knob ignored. This sounds almost like a plucked instrument, with each of the long articulations having its own distinct flavor. Bend the pitch an octave or two down for more sonic variations. The long and short articulations have different value ranges for the attack and release controls, but in general those controls behave as you'd expect. The details are in the user guide. Simulated vibrato is also available, similar to the Vengeful series of strings. The vibrato controls have slightly different range of values for the unison voice for a greater sense of independence between the two voices. And speaking of unison, this can be used to emulate playing on both G strings at once or to simulate two players. The solo mode can be used to get just the unison voice by itself, and the transpose control can shift the unison voice down an octave or two for a fuller sound. The sample library contains roughly 1 GB of samples as unlocked 24-bit WAV files. The stereo mic samples are in stereo and the piezo samples are mono. Long bowed articulations have 1 dynamic layer and 2 round robins, while the short articulations have 2 dynamic layers and 4 round robins. The natural articulation is ordinary sustained bowed notes. The staccato articulation is performed in the same way as you'd expect on a violin or other bowed strings. Pizzicato is performed by plucking the string with the finger. The higher velocities can get pretty hard. Colonial Battuto is a technique where the strings are struck with the wood side of the bow. This is the least favorite technique of many string players, but not the guy who recorded this Kemençe apparently. With the sul ponticello technique, the strings are bowed very close to the bridge, and this gets quite bright and sometimes harsh. Artificial harmonics are 2 octaves above the normal pitch like the harmonics on a violin would typically be, and the highest notes get quite unstable here. Because tremolo is a technique commonly used in many traditional styles, there are 2 speeds sampled, tremolo slow and tremolo fast. The Colonial Battuto technique is played by dragging the wood of the bow across the strings. Here it was played with a good amount of rosin on the wood of the bow, and this is as noisy and screechy as it gets in case the sul ponticello is too tame for you. This is an especially interesting sound to pitch an octave or 2 down. Not that it's the only interesting one, here are some of the other articulations shifted down. And finally, as you might have just noticed, there is a noiseless articulation, which includes percussive sounds made by hitting the instrument's body, sounds made by swirling the bow on the body, and bowing the strings behind the bridge. A description of each sample is included in the user guide, and here's how the articulation sounds without being shifted down. So if you like it, tell a friend. If you like it and you don't have any friends, tell an enemy. And thanks for watching.